As we go through the 2016 election, there's going to be a lot of discussion, obviously, about foreign policy and what our motivation should be as we conduct our foreign policy. And I thought for the history video, it would be a good idea to give kind of an overview of the evolution of foreign policy throughout the ages. In the beginning, foreign policy was largely dictated by the church. We're speaking mainly about Europe now. Nations acted according to their religion, not according to their national interest. And this reflected the Protestant Reformation and the desire of the Catholic Church to keep its monopoly on Christianity. And therefore, the German states, which were Protestant, and Scandinavia, that was Protestant, allied with England, which was Protestant, against France and Spain and Italy and Austria, which were Catholic. And that was the polarity that dominated Europe during the 7 Years' War and in the latter part of the 18th century. Then in the middle of the 17th century, Cardinal Richelieu, who was the French foreign minister, redefined the whole notion of foreign policy and took it away from domination by the church. This reflected the emergence of the nation states and the cooling of the fight between Catholics and Protestants. And he defined his foreign policy as based on l'intérêt d'État, the interests of the state, national interest. And France, which was Catholic and even persecuting the Protestants at that point, allied itself internationally with many of the Protestant forces against the Catholic forces, against Austria and Italy, and sometimes even against Spain. And it became the national interest that dominated, which was a whole new concept. Rather than base it on religion, base it on the geographic entity of the nation state. That theory predominated during the 18th century, going into the 19th. And after the Napoleonic Wars, the victorious powers formed the Quadruple Alliance, which was Russia, Prussia, Austria, and France, with England sort of involved, the fifth member of the Quadruple Alliance, occasionally there, sometimes not. And the goal of the Quadruple Alliance was to link the national interests of those countries toward maintaining monarchy and reversing the tide of the French Revolution, to go back to l'Ancien Régime, the Louis XVI regime, which was basically an absolute monarchy, and not give in to democracy as the pressures for democracy were building throughout Central Europe. And they forcibly put down revolutions in 1830 and 1848 in Greece, Hungary, Germany, and exterminated the push for democracy. Now, the Quadruple Alliance lasted really as a major force throughout the 19th century, and it was dominated by Prince Metternich of Austria, who maintained it and maintained an alliance among those monarchies. But then it began to fall apart as countries began to compete with each other in armaments. And in particular, when Bismarck took over in Germany, he basically replaced the Metternich Quadruple Alliance with a return to national interest. And in this case, Germany fought France in the Franco-Prussian War. As a result of the wars that took place then, there was increasingly a feeling that you needed a balance of power, and that balance of power concept came to supersede the idea of the Quadruple Alliance as the basis of foreign policy. And each side armed up to the teeth. Each side tried to counter the other. They formed alliances, France, Britain, and Russia, against Germany and Austro-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. And all Europe was divided into this balance of power. The balance of power collapsed in World War I, when it led to this bloody, horrible war that just almost destroyed Western civilization. And that led Woodrow Wilson from the United States to say that we wanted to supersede the balance of power, that the peace could not be maintained by the balance of power and terror, because you needed instead international law, where the collective wisdom of all of the peoples of the world would unite against aggressors and force them to live as countries just like people have to live in society bound by laws. When the Cold War came, yet another doctrine superseded the international law doctrine, and that was collective security. No longer the balance of power, but countries formed together in groups like NATO, alliances, where an attack on one was considered to be an attack on everybody. And peace in the world was maintained not by a balance of power, but by a balance of terror, called mutually assured destruction, MAD, where nobody would launch a war because it might obliterate the entire planet. And then after the Soviet Union fell, we have no coherent doctrine as to how foreign policy ought to work. There are still the people who believe in national interest predominantly, and I think I'd put Trump into that category. There are the people who believe in the international rule of law, and I'd put Obama and Hillary into that category. There are many who still believe in collective security through alliances, and we really have to see what comes out, particularly as Trump mounts his challenge to the conventional wisdom that has dominated our foreign policy ever since World War II. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching.